Hi, and welcome to our webinar today. Our speaker, Dr. Ryan Phillips, is an assistant professor here at Lewis University, and he will be discussing drones, the future of aviation. This webinar is being sponsored by the Aviation Alumni Organization, an organization that was established in 2014 for and by aviation alumni to provide networking and professional development opportunities to other aviation alumni and those interested in the aviation field and industry. If you are interested in learning more about the Alumni Organization, please visit alumni.lusu.edu/LUAAO. And throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, please email them to alumni@lusu.edu, and we'll be able to address questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you, and thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy.
Thanks, Joe, for the introduction. My name is Dr. Ryan Phillips, as Joe stated, and I am the Director of Unmanned Aircraft Systems at Lewis University. I've been a professor here at Lewis now for approximately 4 years. I have all of my fixed-wing aircraft certifications up through the CFII and multi-engine instructor ratings, and have been in charge of the program now for roughly about 1 year. We're going to jump into the slideshow here. Again, please email questions, as Joe stated, and we'll get those questions answered at the conclusion of the slideshow presentation. Okay, again, here's a quick reminder of where you should send those questions and inquiries as we progress through the slideshow today. But let's jump in to a basic introductory slide on where the term drone actually originates. There's a difference of opinion on this, but one of the most held examples or takes on this is there's an aircraft called the de Havilland Gypsy Moth that was in production a number of years ago. And the name of that aircraft was recently changed to the Queen Bee. So, as you know, there's different types of bees. You have the queen, and then you have the worker bees, who are the drones, the ones who kind of go out and do the mindless work on the flowers and pollinating vegetation, etc. So this is one of the most widely held, accepted viewpoints on where the term drone actually originates. But once that term was actually more readily utilized in aviation, they started to be, unmanned aircraft actually started to be utilized during the First and Second World Wars. They were having a difficult time training gunners on Navy ships to shoot down incoming aircraft. And as a result of that, they decided, well, we can't obviously send manned aircraft up to get the job done. We need to send unmanned aircraft up, actual aircraft, so our targeters can practice shooting these aircraft down. So that's what they did. They send up these autonomous aircraft, they fly around, and the gunners would get real practice shooting down actual aircraft. The preferred nomenclature is Unmanned Aircraft System. This is the term that the FAA appears to be adopting. UAV is another one that you'll see quite frequently. This stands for Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. And then the military branches tend to stick with RPV and RPA, which stands for Remotely Piloted Vehicle and Remotely Piloted Aircraft. We're going to talk about what an SUAS is today, male and hail, nano and micro. Male and hail, these are typically medium altitude and high altitude long endurance aircraft that can stay up in the air for days practically, doing reconnaissance and other sorts of mission objectives. Nano and micro UASs would be something that would fit in the palm of your hand, as shown in the upper right portion of your screen there. But again, we're going to jump in here. A Global Hawk, you probably hear about that in the news. A Global Hawk, Predator, they're in the news a lot regarding military operations. These aircraft can fly to 50, 60,000 feet, stay on station for hours at a time. But primarily today, we're going to talk more about the small unmanned aircraft systems, which are aircraft that actually weigh under 55 pounds. Real briefly, here's a couple projections from the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. they're projecting 90% of known potential markets to be in one of two areas. The first being agriculture, the second being in public safety. And we here at Lewis are focusing on both of these areas for now as we continue to grow the program here. Here's some staggering numbers though. This organization is estimating $13.6 billion of economic impact in the first 3 years of this technology being implemented, with an overall impact of $82.1 billion, with approximately 103,000 jobs projected in the next 10 years. So obviously this industry is projected to grow and be huge, but these are just a few of the projections that are out there regarding this new technology. Today though, I want to highlight some of the areas that these devices will actually be used in. Here's a brief summary of these areas, but we're just going to jump in and work our way through here. Photogrammetry is a term that you may or may not have heard of, but basically what it involves is when you have, it doesn't have to be an aircraft, it could be a person, etc., but you take multiple photographs of a subject. The subject could be, in this case, a farm field, it could be a strip mining operation, it could be an automobile, doesn't matter, but you take multiple photographs and you overlap each of the photographs. So you take one shot, the next shot, you make sure half of the previous photo was in that second shot, and you work your way around the subject from multiple various angles. Once you've completed that, you upload the software into, upload the photographs into the software that essentially will stitch the photos together and form a 3D image. It's so accurate, in fact, that you can actually do volumetric computations based off of this technology. So if I was a strip mining operation and I wanted to see how much material we removed, in a certain amount of period of time, I could do this through photogrammetry, which is much easier than, say, calculating it or weighing it or just estimating it. It'll give us a much more detailed picture. Kind of showcase photogrammetry a little bit more. This is a project I got to help out with. I went to Colorado last spring to get some training from unmanned experts on unmanned aerial vehicles. And they were working on a research project for public safety, where they wanted to see if they could accurately record a car accident scene using aerial photography and photogrammetry. As we all know, we've been on the highway before when there's an accident up ahead, a real serious accident. The road can be shut down for hours while law enforcement, public safety officials try to get measurements and figure out what exactly happened or led up to the accident. What these gentlemen were trying to prove or showcase is, could photogrammetry substitute for a police officer measuring or taking measurements of skid marks or those sorts of things on the road. So essentially what we have here is an aerial image of a mock car accident, so to speak. I'm going to jump ahead to the next slide. But this red Isuzu truck, you can even see trailing behind it the skid marks associated with it, kind of came flying in and about 40 or 50 miles an hour hit the brakes to kind of show, simulate an actual car accident. Then the back of this black vehicle was, the Camry was backed into place. And then what the gentleman did, and again I got to help with this, it was very interesting, is they threw artifacts all around the mock car accident scene. So on the bottom right hand of your screen you can see a red circle there. That's actually a toy handgun. Up the circle more towards the center of the screen is a set of car keys. And what they would do is next to each one of these artifacts they'd put a little white target or bullseye to make them more readily identifiable from the sky. So if you actually look at the scene here, you can see multiple targets, multiple artifacts. And then what we did is we got some surveying equipment out and we set up, kind of the mother station, and my job was to go to each one of the targets and place the prism, the stick with the prism on it, on top, and we accurately recorded how far away from the reference point each one of these artifacts was, precisely. The whole process took about 2 hours. I believe we had about 15 artifacts, if memory serves. But again, 2 hours. So just imagine that being a highway being shut down for that period of time. Obviously, gridlock and pandemonium. But anyway, after we did this, we took the UAV up, and it actually flew kind of a back and forth route over the scene, and it recorded photographs that overlap, like we talked about, photogrammetrically, excuse me. Once this was complete, it did a constant radius orbit around the scene, again snapping those overlap photos. And they uploaded the photographs into software, and eventually, about 2 weeks later, I inquired what the results were, and they found out that each of the artifacts was within an inch or two of accuracy compared to actually doing it, with the surveying tools that we utilize. So how long did the flight actually take? Both flights took a total of 20 minutes. So basically, 1/6 of the time as it did to do everything manually. So imagine a police officer pulling up on an accident scene, pulling a UAV out of the trunk of the car, and having it fly over the route, snapping away, and then they have everything they need. They could pull the vehicles out of the way and get traffic flowing back through on the highway or the interstate. Agriculture, another one. What we're looking at here is an aerial photograph of crops. And if you look on the areas inside of the black rectangles, what we're seeing are some different types of things. I'm not a horticulturist or an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but these are parasites or fungus type things showing up in an aerial image. So why is this attractive to a farmer? Main reason that it is crop scouting is something that a farmer should invest in every year during the growing season. A crop scout will come out, walk through various portions of the field, look for certain pests, signs that you're over-fertilizing, under-fertilizing, etc. To report back to the farmer, hey, here's what I found, and based off of those recommendations, the farmer will decide how he or she would like to treat the situation. In this example, you can see that only a few spots of the field are discolored. But if a crop scout, you can also take a look at this field and notice that a crop scout would have to literally walk into each one of those smaller areas to detect that type of issue. Using an unmanned aerial vehicle, obviously it's enticing because you could take it up, essentially fly it around, look for these issues. Once you've identified where they are, you could physically walk into the field and go get a better idea or get a better report of what is actually occurring in those sectors. So again, what's nice about this is a crop scout could kind of zero in on those problematic areas instead of it basically being luck or having to walk through an entire field, which is just physically impossible if you have hundreds of acres to try to find those types of issues. What it'll allow the farmer to do, on the other hand, is now they can treat these specific areas instead of blanket treating the entire field. So if I report that there's some silk or corn borer issues in a farm field to the farmer, he may spray his entire field when in reality maybe he only needed to spray a handful of acres to head the pest off before it spread to the rest of my field. And what we're talking about here is called precision agriculture. Precision agriculture is where you maximize your yield and mitigate as much as possible your costs or expenses. And those costs could be monetary and with regards to buying fertilizers, buying pesticides, or it could also simply mean the impact on the environment as well. If you don't need to spray your entire field to kill a pest, then that's obviously better for the environment, better for the rest of the field as well. This is an irrigation application management example. We have two photographs here. The one on the left is taken just with the visible spectrum. Basically what you see is what you get. On the right, what we have here is like a multispectral image. And you can kind of see, the one I like to point people out is the right circle on the far right side of the screen, the field there. If you look at it, half of it's kind of a darker orange and the more eastern hemisphere there is a little bit lighter. When you compare that image to the visual one on the left side of the screen, you can't really see any types of differences. What we're looking at here is called a normalized differential vegetation index, where looking at a field through different spectrums can allow you or the farmer or the crop scout to detect issues before they're even visible to the human eye. So it's kind of an interesting idea and also very enticing to the farmer if he or she can detect some sort of an issue before it's even visible to, say, a crop scout, and they can head that off. It'll maximize their yield during the harvest. So obviously it's an attractive thing to a farmer as well. And a UAS or UAV would allow a farmer to do this. And what's also kind of neat about this is the farmer could fly this as often as they wanted if they own their own device, or if they didn't want to operate their own, they could hire it out, and they could compare the images through the growing season. So it's no tough sell, to the farming community on why this might be beneficial. This image, too, just to point out, is taken at a higher altitude. This is actually a satellite image. Issues with satellite imagery is the resolution isn't the best. For one thing. The other thing is what if you pay a service for some satellite imagery and there's cloud cover, over the top of your field. If it's a cloudy day, you're not going to see what you want to see. A UAV would be able to fly underneath the clouds and get the data that you need to make more informed decisions as a farmer as well. Aerial application. Crop dusting or spraying is a fairly dangerous profession. Maybe some of our alumni are involved in this field. One of the big issues is just being able to be insured to operate, an aircraft in this type of manner. If you're flying at low altitudes and high airspeeds, if you're in a fixed-wing aircraft, some spraying is obviously done with a helicopter as well. But you're operating your power lines, you're operating close to the fields, you're also dealing with chemicals, which, overspray. Some of those chemicals are still circulating, as you make your passes through the field, and a human being would be exposed to some level of that, no matter how precise you're doing it. So one possible solution to that type of issue is to kind of push aerial application into more of an unmanned aircraft system, type of setup. What we're looking at here is a picture of an RMAX, Yamaha RMAX. It actually is the same company that builds the Yamaha motorcycles and dirt bikes. This one runs on a 2-cycle engine, so it literally does sound like a dirt bike as it's shooting through an off-road course. It's fairly small. If you actually look at the bottom right picture there, the rotor span of this aircraft is approximately 12 feet. It can only carry a payload of about 60 pounds worth of chemicals, and you can see that in the 2 tanks in the topmost picture there on the left and right side of the fuselage of the aircraft. These are being used a lot in Asia. If you look at that larger picture there, you can see this is actually over a rice paddy in somewhat hilly and mountainous terrain. So the reason this aircraft is attractive to farmers in that type of region is it's able to get into those tight spaces, for one thing, where it would be difficult for, say, someone flying an egg cat or a larger, fixed-wing aircraft to operate safely in there. With the high sides of the valley there, it would be very dangerous or maybe even impossible to do that. So this device allows farmers of smaller acreages to spray, fertilize, spray pesticides, etc., and also do some of those other things we talked about. Take aerial, an aerial photograph or compare NDVIs throughout the season. If you had the proper sensor package on the aircraft. This is attractive to insurance companies. For one thing, there's no human being involved on the aircraft, so if one of these devices does crash or is damaged through the operation, it's not a big deal. Nobody was hurt So it's just the insurance of the actual device or the aircraft. Price range on these is starting at $86,000 US all the way up to $1 million for a fully autonomous one. Or you could essentially program in the route that you wanted to fly, the altitude above the ground that you wanted to fly at, and then it would go off and fly and spray your field. Again, this is systematic and precise and exactly meets the definition of what precision agriculture actually is. Been talking a lot about agriculture. Let's jump into public safety right now. A lot of different applications here. Bomb squad, suspect tracking, surveillance, disaster issues, firefighting. Bomb squad, if there's some sort of a device, and this is what some of our troops are using these for, a suspicious looking device up ahead or it's detected, this device could get in and get a closer look to see if that really is just some debris along the side of a road, or if it is something more nefarious. Suspect tracking, one of my favorite stories, a law enforcement unit out west actually had a suspect bust out of the police car or get loose when they're trying to apprehend him. Ended up running into a cornfield and hiding in there. And at that time, I guess the police didn't know if he was carrying a weapon or anything along those lines. Like you said, he got loose while they were trying to apprehend him. So they actually had a UAV with them, but at the time they were limited to daylight operations only from the Federal Aviation Administration. So it was getting dark, or it already was dark. They called to see if they could get permissions to operate this, but they couldn't because it was daylight ops only. Long story short, they kind of waited the suspect out. Daytime came and they flew the device up, located him, were able to tell if he was armed or not, and were able to direct police officers to the suspect safely, as opposed to them having to go in there and try to find him, you know, at nighttime, not knowing if he possessed a gun or a knife or anything along those lines. So safe conclusion, you know, kept the officers safe, also gave them eyes in the sky at a much lower cost than, say, a helicopter would, a manned helicopter. Surveillance, primary use of these devices, you know, in the military is for doing surveillance. For public safety, the same thing could be said. With facial recognition software and some of these other types of technologies now, it's not too far of a stretch to see these hovering over a concert venue or a sporting event, just keeping an eye on things. Disaster issues. When the tsunami hit in Japan, the nuclear reactors were compromised. These devices were utilized to go in and actually measure radiation levels and see what the status of the reactors was. Obviously much safer to send a device like this in instead of a human being, especially into a highly irradiated or dangerous area. Firefighting, you know, especially out west, California, during the wildfires, these devices could be used to get an idea of which way the fire is heading, help pick up on wind shifts so firefighters can better position themselves. What's nice about these is satellite imagery does assist with that. However, again, with smoke cover, it's going to be difficult to get some of the detail and see the things you want to see. So these devices could get in closer, you know, to actually take a look and try to help firefighters as they combat, you know, some of these wildlife fires. Inspections. How do you safely inspect the underside of a bridge, a wind turbine, a skyscraper, smokestacks? You know, until these types of devices, a human being would have to clamber up there and find a way to actually take a look at these types of things. Wind turbines are becoming more and more prevalent. You could put an infrared camera on here, fly it through a wind turbine farm, and say, well, this unit here appears to be running hotter than all the subsequent units. Let's shut it down and take a look. Maybe a component or a bearing starting to wear. Can kind of help detect those instances prior to there being an issue. Fly it up under a bridge. How do you inspect a bridge that's over a river safely? Again, a human being would have to harness up, climb under there. Skyscrapers, property damage is becoming a big interest of the insurance companies out there, like State Farm, Nationwide, etc. Basically, hailstorm comes through, part of the state and damages a large portion of the town. Obviously, a lot of people are going to have claims filed. They're going to need someone to come out and assess the damages. Well, this technology would allow that to happen without having to physically send somebody up on 25 or 30 roofs in a neighborhood to file these claim reports. So a lot of these types of companies are interested in assessing property damage and those sorts of things. Smokestack inspections too, getting up high, being able to actually look down in safely without having to send a human being up on the outside of a smokestack to take a look. Package delivery. Back in November, Amazon actually put out an advertisement for pilots to begin gearing up for package delivery. A lot of people hear this and they just laugh and try to envision one of these things being dropped on their front porch. You would not be getting a home weight set with one of these devices. They'd still have to truck that in. But for smaller items, really, if you look at a UPS or a FedEx, one of their largest costs associated with their type of operation is literally driving the truck to each address and delivering it. If you ever watch those drivers, they are really moving to get those packages delivered on time. And I'm not saying they drive fast or anything like that, but they pull up at your house, they're off the truck, hoofing it to your front door to make a delivery. And I think what these companies are more interested in is what they'd like to do is be able to pull a large truck into the center of town, have the operator or driver go in the back, load each one up, each UAV up, and have these things autonomously fly to the addresses that they're supposed to. Make their delivery, come back. The operator maybe swaps out a battery, slaps a new package in, tells it where to go next, and they all head off into space again. You're not burning fuel associated with driving the route anymore. It can be done, you're doing multiple deliveries at the same amount of time it would take to do, one or two. So that's possibly what they're looking at. But some of the issues associated with that are everybody's front porch is different. Can these things detect the kid playing football in the front yard? Can these devices fly around that tree or that power line in your neighborhood without snagging one? So that's really the charge of these types of computer programming and software developers, is to design these devices with an artificial intelligence where they can detect obstacles and still safely make the delivery, detect people, detect the dog that's chasing them as they're trying to land, etc., to prevent anybody from being hurt or from any property being damaged. So it'd be interesting to watch this technology continue to be developed and be utilized for delivery means. Conservation, tracking animal movements. Range owners, ranchers, they are interested in this for keeping an eye on their herd without having to physically go out there and locate them. And a lot of these things, again, could be done with a manned aircraft, but it's a lot cheaper to utilize a UAV. Forest land status, herd counts, etc. What we need to spend some time discussing, though, is the rules regarding the use of these devices. The FAA has currently issued an NPRM, which stands for Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. It was issued on February 15th of 2015. I've got a link down here at the bottom too, or the web address anyway, that you can actually click on, or not click on, but enter in. Go to the FAA website for more information. But the NPRM is published on there, and it's open for 60 days for public comment. But at this time, to be a UAS operator for hire, so to speak, which is called a commercial operator. And let's just talk about that real briefly. A commercial operator is someone who operates an aircraft for compensation or for money. or higher, all right? So if I wanted to, say, do aerial photography, for example, using a UAV for weddings or for real estate, etc., I would be essentially offering my services for a fee, and you would be construed as a commercial operator in the eyes of the FAA. Well, why is that important? It's important because if you're a commercial operator, that means that you need to have a commercial operator certificate, basically authorizing you to fly for hire. And there isn't one right now for unmanned aircraft systems. So currently, the NPRM, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in the final minutes of this talk, but the NPRM kind of lays out what those certification requirements will look like. But the final rule isn't supposed to go into effect for another year or so. Once the NPRM goes back under wraps, the FAA will decide what the actual rule will look like and be, and it will get released when they're ready. So in the meantime, if you do want to operate a UAS for hire, you need to be granted an exemption and a certificate of authorization to do this. An exemption basically lays out which rules you want to be exempt from. There's a regulation, for example, that requires a 45-minute fuel reserve, or for night flying in an aircraft, a manned aircraft, or 30 minutes during the day. All right. Well, these devices, 30 minutes is like the life of one of the batteries, one charge. So I would request exemption from that FAR because it doesn't really fit what my aircraft is even capable of, and you would have to explain why. So basically, you need to lay out for the FAA, here's what I'd like to do, here's the rules that are keeping me from being able to do it, and I'm asking for exemptions from these rules, and this is why. It takes approximately 4 months or so to be granted an exemption from the time you submit it. Once that's granted, now you need a certificate of authorization to fly, which is essentially saying, I'm going to fly this aircraft, here's my checklist, here's the procedures I'm going to use to keep everybody safe. I'm not going to fly it in these areas, I'm only going to fly it in this type of area or in these types of operations. So again, that's another process. You submit more paperwork. If the FAA grants you the exemption in the COA, then you're essentially okay to operate. If you need to amend any of those types of things, like let's say I want to switch to a different aircraft or a different platform, I would need to file, a revision with the FAA to be able to do that. Heavy fines are possible to individuals and organizations that do not follow these guidelines. They're in the news quite a bit. Almost every day you'll see something on MSN or on one of the news stations or networks talking about someone who operated a UAS, and maybe it was irresponsible or not, but the FAA was looking into it. So this slide explains a little bit more about what you can currently need to do to try to be able to operate one of these devices legally. The NPRM itself here's just some of the highlights. Again, it's for small UAS under 55 pounds. There's a maximum airspeed, a limitation of 100 miles an hour, and a 500-foot restriction on altitude above ground level. You're required to maintain VLOS, which stands for visual line of sight. Some of these devices have the capability of being able to transmit their telemetry data through the camera back to you, where you could theoretically be able to fly this well beyond visual range. The FAA said no, that's not doable because if your camera system essentially goes out or that telemetry data isn't coming back, you have no way of knowing where it is, what's happening, is it over a playground, or what do you do? So they're mandating. They plan to mandate, and again, these are just the notice of proposed rules, okay? But that you have to maintain visual line of sight during operations. Personnel considerations, you've got to be 17 years of age, okay? You have to undergo, basically take an FAA knowledge examination to operate one of these. Once you pass the examination, that states that you can operate, or that you've shown the level of knowledge and proficiency needed to operate one of these devices. Airspace restrictions. Again, there's a 500-foot altitude limitation above ground level on these. But if you are going to operate, the device in airspace, that's Class B, C, D, E, which, obviously for some of you, you know what those classifications are, others don't. Class B airspace would be very busy airspace, say around Chicago O'Hare, or, a large city like New York would have a Class B airport. Class C is a little smaller. It's like your Midway type airports, Grand Rapids, Michigan type of an airport. And then a Class D would be something smaller, like in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or Aurora, Illinois. But anyway, it's not illegal to operate these devices in these airspaces, but you have to have FAA permission from the controlling agency. So you couldn't just walk out there and fire one of these up inside one of the airspaces and be good to go. You would be in big trouble. You would need FAA permissions from the controlling agency to be able to do that. Class G airspace is your uncontrolled airspace, and the NPRM is highlighting that flight permissions in that area would not require special permissions. That's uncontrolled. There's not a control tower or a controlled airport associated with it. No medical at this time is what they're saying will be required. Pilots need medical certificates to be able to operate aircraft, manned aircraft. At this time, they're saying that no medical will be required for unmanned aircraft systems. A couple quick things too. Again, this is all proposed, but for an individual to operate a UAS, they must pass the FAA knowledge exam, register their UAS. Aircraft in the United States have to have an N number, N because the first letter in the registration number on an aircraft is an N, as in November. Unmanned aircraft systems are going to be subject to the same registration process. Granted, you're not going to be able to fit the same size lettering on a small unmanned aircraft system as you would on, say, a Cessna, but you have to have it registered, and that number will have to be displayed on the aircraft. You have to operate the device safely and ethically. You don't fly it over people. You keep it in line of sight at all times. Training recurrently. Every 2 years you're going to have to undergo another knowledge examination to maintain your certificate. And you have to have safety parameters in place, a pre-flight inspection, a post-flight inspection. What does a checklist look like for an SUAS? And again, the NPRM is open for comment for 60 days. I barely scratched the surface here on this too, but when in doubt, if you currently have a small unmanned aircraft system and you're wondering if you can legally operate it in some way, shape, or form, your best bet is to go on the FAA.gov website and locate your local Flight Standards District Office, or FSDO, and call them up and ask them, if you can do what you want to do. Anyway, that's just kind of a warning to everybody too. It's better to ask and get kind of notification before you actually jump in and do something that the FAA construes as being illegal, and they come back and hit you with a fine or something along those lines. So operating them safely and ethically is important. And again, these are just proposed rules. These could change. They most likely will. It's open for comment for roughly another 30 days. More information, again, is down here at the FAA.gov/UAS website, for those types of inquiries. I've also included my contact information. If you do think of any questions or comments or concerns afterwards, that's fine. But for now, I guess we'll turn it over to you guys who have been emailing in questions.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And so we do have a couple of questions. This first question is from Jeff from Chicago. He wanted to know what your thoughts are on a totally unmanned airliner.
Okay, that's one of the questions I get is, will we ever see the day when there's nobody, no human being at the front of the aircraft? It's passengers, flight attendants, and the aircraft is being controlled either autonomously or from somebody, say, on in a ground control station elsewhere. I personally don't think we'll ever see the day when that's the case, mainly for passenger reassurance. People like the idea of someone being up at the front who can override an automated system or who can troubleshoot things a little differently than, say, something with artificial intelligence would. Perhaps we'll see the day when there's only one crew member up there with a ground support crew, you know, back in the United States who are keeping an eye on things. I like to think of an international flight as a possible example. Currently, you know, as airline pilots know, there's duty time restrictions when an aircraft is flown overseas. So if it's a multiple hour flight, say to Asia, it's a 20-some hour flight, they're going to need multiple crews to remain, you know, legal and not max out on the duty time of, or go over, I should say, the duty time of those crew members. So maybe it's a possibility down the road that you're up in the front as the pilot, you take off, get to a safe altitude, the controls handed off to the automation system or to the ground crew, and they tell you to go take a nap, and they wake you up in 8 hours or 9 hours to land at your destination. I don't think we're anywhere near close to this happening, but these are just a few of the things that are being thrown around, you know, when you talk to some of the unmanned experts in industry. But I don't feel that we'll ever see the day when there's a flight full of 200 or 300 people without somebody being up front who can keep an eye on the situation.
And we have time for one more question. So our second question comes from Kristen in Denver. She wants to know how the U.S. compares to the rest of the world in regards to regulations for unmanned aerial systems.
The United States, if you look at some of the other more developed countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, Spain, Japan, Germany, rules and regulations for UAS have been in place in these regions for a while. The United States is catching up. It's good to see that the NPRM is out as we continue to, you know, press forward. But the United States, though arguably also has some of the most complex airspace infrastructure in the world too. So it's really not comparing, say, apples to apples in all cases. However, with that being said, other more developed countries have, you know, implemented rules and regulations, you know, that have been in place for a number of years already. So.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope that you found it very enjoyable and informational. On the slide now you'll see some of the upcoming events that the Aviation Alumni Organization is both planning and sponsoring, as well as supporting from on campus. The first being the networking event next Tuesday on the 24th at 6:30 p.m. The annual meeting on April 18th, that's a Saturday at 10 a.m., being held in collaboration with the Women and Minorities in Aviation Conference that day. And then in July, we'll be going to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the EAA Air Ventures Air Show. We'll have a reception at a restaurant. You can find more information, details, and register for these and other alumni events at alumni.lewisu.edu/LUAAO. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.